Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about my top 20 favourite films from 1988. These are all in accordance with the release dates from IMDb. And again, there's no real right or wrong to this list. These are just my personal favourite top 20 films. So 1988 churned out quite a lot of films this year. Doing the research for this year, I actually ended up watching close to about 100 films. It's really hard to narrow it down. There are about 50 in there that really stood out to me, but I managed to narrow down the honourable mentions. So that being said, I'm going to get straight in to talking about the films that didn't quite make the list for me. So starting off, my honourable mentions with Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Great sort of underrated horror comedy film from 88. Absolutely love this one. Next up is Cohen and Tate with Roy Scheider and Adam Baldwin pretty much playing two hitmen that kidnapped this child who was witness to a murder. And as they travel with him back to the mob bosses, the child sort of knows that the two hitmen don't really get on, so he uses that to his advantage to try and get them to argue and fight. Really underrated film in my opinion. Next up for me is The Land Before Time. Just a really good Don Bluth animated film. It's a bit of a tearjerker one, but the animation in it is absolutely stellar. Next up is Young Guns. Great western, this one, with an absolute great cast. Massively entertaining. Arnold Schwarzenegger in Red Heat. Just this really good crime action film with Jim Belushi and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Absolutely loved it. Check it out if you've not seen it. Next honourable mention for me is Killer Clowns from Outer Space. It's as wacky and as crazy as it sounds. Great B movie, off the charts in the entertainment factor. Check it out if you've not seen it. The next one for me is another Schwarzenegger film, and that is Twins, also starring Danny DeVito. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito play twins. It's as crazy and as fun as it looks. Check it out if you've not seen it. Next for me is probably one of Van Damme's most competent films in my opinion, and that is Bloodsport. Great sort of martial arts tournament movie this. In my opinion, Jean-Claude Van Damme's best film. Next up is Bull Durham. Really well done and well acted baseball movie. Hugely enjoyed it. The Great Outdoors. This is like a sort of great odd couple movie with Dan Aykroyd and John Candy. Some really funny stuff in there as well. Next up is one that's probably famous for being a bit of a tearjerker, and that is Beaches with Bette Midler and Barbara Hershey. It's what you'd absolutely expect from this type of movie. Very sappy, but still very enjoyable at the same time. Next up for me is Coming to America with Eddie Murphy. Pretty much follows Eddie Murphy's character, who's sort of heir to the throne and wants to find love for himself, so he ends up coming to the States. He plays a couple of characters in it as well. The barber he plays is absolutely hysterical. But yeah, the sequel that came out on Amazon a few weeks ago was absolutely garbage. Just rewatch this one again. Next for me is David Cronenberg's Dead Ringers. Really good, creepy sort of body horror film. This starring Jeremy Irons as twins Beverly and Elliot. If you've not seen it, check it out. Next up for me is Working Girl with Melanie Griffith, Harrison Ford. Really good sort of office movie, this one. Great to see Sigourney Weaver sort of play the villain in this as well. Next up for me is Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. Really good biblical epic, this one. Check it out if you've not seen it. I enjoyed it. Next for me is probably one of the most critically acclaimed films from this year, but didn't quite make my list, and that is Cinema Paradiso. Great sort of childhood film, reliving going to the cinema. Absolutely, really, really enjoyed it, but as I said, didn't quite make the list for me. There were a lot more films I enjoyed more. Next up is Scrooged with Bill Murray. This is a film I watch every year at Christmas. Great spin on the Charles Dickens Christmas Carol tale. Just absolutely love this one. Next up for me is Dangerous Liaisons. Great sort of period drama, this one, with an absolute stellar cast. And my last honourable mention from 88 is John Waters' Hairspray. Great cast. Massive step up for me from Pink Flamingos, which was one of the toughest films to watch. But I absolutely love this one. This was a 180 for me. Completely won me over with this film. Hugely entertaining and enjoyable. So that being said, topping off my honourable mentions, I'm going to get straight into the list at number 20. And that for me is a very underrated film. It's Miracle Mile, starring Anthony Edwards, probably most famous for his role in ER. The premise of this is pretty much this diner in this little town. There's a phone call that comes in from someone outside, and Anthony Edwards answers the phone, and he's told there's going to be a nuclear bomb strike where you are. You need to evacuate. You've only got so much time to do it. So then Anthony Edwards has to sort of convince everyone that there's a bomb. We need to evacuate. Really, really good sort of tense thriller, this one. Massively underrated in my opinion. Check it out if you've not seen it. It's coming in at number 19 for me is Jodie Foster in The Accused. Really disturbing end to this film for me. Movie starts off with a shot of this bar, and Jodie Foster's character just comes running out of it, and we don't really know what's happened. But as the film goes on, we realise that Jodie Foster was actually gangbanged by a group of men, and the film sort of leads to the conclusion that can we actually prosecute the men who didn't actually rape you, but the men who actually instigated it and didn't really do anything to help or stop the rape, which leads to a climax for me that is just absolutely disturbing, really difficult to watch, but still a fantastic film. So coming up next for me at the number 18 spot is another sort of underrated horror film, and that is Maniac Cop. Great cast to this one. You've got Tom Atkins and Bruce Campbell as well, who's a sort of main antagonist. Not really a likeable antagonist. The guy at the beginning's having an affair. But the premise of this film basically follows a mysterious series of murders that are happening by a police officer who was believed to be dead. There's also a great backstory to the actual police officer as well. Leads to one of my favourite scene in the movie, which is where the killer has a flashback to his time in prison. Absolutely love this one. Check it out if you've not seen it. Hugely underrated in my opinion. So coming up next for me is similar to The Fly. It is a great sort of 80s remake of a 50s classic, and that is The Blob. Really good creative depths in this film. Sort of follows this alien entity that lands on Earth and evolves into this blob that wanting to take out this entire town. You got Kevin Dillon in there as well, in an early role from him. He kind of looks like Brian May in this film a little bit. But yeah, absolutely love it. It's a great horror film, great effects that still hold up. Some shocking deaths in it as well. It ends on a cliffhanger, but we never really got a sequel to this, but I'm okay with that. This still holds up on its own. It's worth checking out if you've not seen it. So coming up next for me is another sort of horror film from this year. And that is Child's Play, starring Chris Sarandon and Brad Dourif. Directed by the same director, Tom Holland, who did Fright Night as well. So yeah, the premise to this film is pretty much we follow Brad Dourif's character, who's a criminal who's being hunted down by the police at the beginning of the film, and he ends up being shot and losing a lot of blood. And the final place before he dies is outside of a toy shop. So he goes in and finds this section where all these good guy dolls are, and he opens a box for one, and using voodoo transports his soul into the doll. Of course, the doll ends up being bought by a mother and given to her son as a birthday gift. And of course, it leads to that old cliche of the child who sees the monster, but no one will believe him. When the mother actually finds out in this film that the doll is alive and is possessed, is just such a great and clever scene. You'll notice when rewatching it at the start, when someone's given a new toy, an electrical toy, like what's the first thing you check for? They don't in this film, but it's absolutely really, really good. I've not seen the remake, but this one for me is still a little dated in parts, but I still think there's still enough there that still holds up. It still is quite a creepy film, but it's worth checking out if you've not seen it. So coming up next for me at the number 15 spot is a very, very underrated film in my opinion. Probably not a lot of people have heard or have seen or even heard of this film. And that is Clean and Sober with Michael Keaton. So I'm actually a massive, massive Michael Keaton fan. I absolutely love him. He's my favourite Batman. Bar Kevin Conroy. But yeah, so Michael Keaton was sort of cast in a lot of comedy roles in the early 80s. He did films like Mr. Mom, Johnny Dangerously, and Gung Ho. I believe that his performance in this film actually led him to get the role of Batman, which a lot of people gave a lot of sort of outcry about and a lot of protest. They weren't really happy with it. But as I said, if a lot more people had seen this film, that probably wouldn't have been the case. Because I absolutely love this film. He gives an absolute stellar performance in it. Absolutely carries the film. It wouldn't really be as good without him. You've got Morgan Freeman in there as well, who's absolutely great. So it follows his character, who's pretty much a drug addict, and he's in a bit of debt, and he tries to sort of rebuild his life at this rehabilitation place. But it's a really, really good, crisp and clear film. I absolutely love it. Check it out if you've not seen it and if you can get hold of it. I know it's quite hard to get hold of, but it's worth the watch. So coming up next for me, the number 14 spot is Tom Hanks in Big. Just a really, really fun kid in a grown-up's body sort of comedy film. Yeah, just massively, massively enjoyed it. The premise sort of follows this kid who wants to be big, and he makes his wish at a fairground, and the next morning he wakes up like in Tom Hanks's body, in his sort of future self. Ends up becoming like this really, really important staff member of a toy company. Leads to the great scene as well where they're playing on the giant keyboard. John Heard in this film as well is actually really funny as the sort of his rival almost, where he works. He just gives off like a great performance of just this whiny little bitch sometimes. Just a hugely fun, entertaining film. Check it out if you've not seen it. So coming up next for me is a Japanese animated film, and that is Akira. So the premise to this pretty much follows this bike gang in this dystopian future of Japan. And one of the members sort of gets like psychic telekinesis powers. But the selling point for me on this film is the absolute scenery and the animation in this film. It's absolutely stellar. Just was the base point for such great animation that came later on in the 90s, and even nowadays. You can just see the inspiration it gave. It's worth watching the film on the visual experience alone. It's just absolutely fantastic. Check it out if you've not seen it. My favourite probably animated film outside of the US. Really good stuff. So coming up next for me, at the number 12 spot, is sort of hybrid of a British-American comedy, and that is Fish Called Wanda. Absolutely great cast in this film. You've got John Cleese and Michael Palin from the UK, and from the US you've got Jamie Lee Curtis and Kevin Kline. The premise to this is sort of follows a successful bank robbery that takes place at the beginning of the film. Not a bank robbery, sorry, a jewelry robbery that takes place, and it leads to all the robbers that took part in it to sort of double cross each other. Again, what carries the film for me is the performances and the characters in the film. You know, Michael Palin, who can't really string a sentence together, he's constantly stuttering. Jamie Lee Curtis, who pretty much gets turned on by all these foreign accents, and Kevin Kline, who's an absolute psycho, who just takes so much offence if you call him stupid. But yeah, it's really just a fun film. So coming up next for me at the number 11 spot is one of my favourite John Carpenter films, and that is They Live. Really great film, this one, in terms of capturing sort of poverty at the start of the film. So it stars Roddy Piper and Keith David, who are both these two sort of drifters who are looking to get work. One of my favourite lines in the film is from Keith David's character, who pretty much says it's really hard to get a job. Like everyone's out for themselves and trying to do you in at the same time. But it ends up turning into this really wacky, crazy sci-fi action film. So they come across this church, which is a bit suspicious, and Roddy Piper's character goes into the church and ends up finding these cardboard boxes full of sunglasses. And what the sunglasses do is they allow you to see the sort of secret alien race that are impersonating the humans. So the glasses let you differentiate between the two. The scene where he's trying to convince Keith David's character to put the glasses on is just the highlight of the film. It leads to just this great action fight scene, which took inspiration from The Quiet Man with John Wayne. It's hilarious, it's entertaining, it's funny. It's just all these things that you wouldn't expect. The film just completely takes a break to let you see this fight scene, and then it's like, once it's over, it's like, oh yeah, we need to finish the film. Yeah, just an absolutely fun, entertaining film. Knocked me socks off the first time I saw it. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. So, leading into the number 10 spot for me is actually the film that won Best Picture this year, and that is Rain Man with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman probably gives his best performance in this. It pretty much follows Tom Cruise's character, whose father's died, and he's not didn't really have the best relationship with his father. But his father was very rich, and in his father's will, he left all his money to half his money to someone else. And Tom Cruise is trying to find out who that other person is, and it leads him to this hospital home where Dustin Hoffman is, who's has autism, and he's told at the hospital that Dustin Hoffman's actually his brother that he never knew about, and the film just sort of builds on their relationship and how Tom Cruise sort of grows to care and love his brother. Just a really, really heartwarming film as well. Really good. Worthy of the Oscar for me. Not a film I liked the first time I saw it, but it did. It's grew on me the more and more I've seen it. It's a must watch, this one. So coming up next for me is another film I believe was nominated for Best Picture but didn't win. And that is Mississippi Burning. Gene Hackman and Willem Dafoe. So they basically play two FBI agents who were brought into this Mississippi town to investigate the disappearance of these three people. But it leads to just such hostility amongst the townspeople, the police, and to make things worse, the KKK as well. It's just this really, really good crime drama. It's totally worth checking out if you've not seen it. I absolutely love this one. Frances McDormand's in there as well, who's great in everything she's in. Just a fantastic, fantastic drama film. Check it out if you've not seen it. So coming up next for me, at the number 8 spot, is another really, really underrated film. That is Running on Empty. So basically the premise to this is it follows a family with their 2 kids who are sort of political terrorists, is probably the best way to describe it. They're wanted by the FBI for setting off a bomb which killed a number of people. So the film is basically they're constantly unsettled and have to move across the country all the time because the FBI is constantly on their chase. But the film follows the eldest of their eldest child, played by River Phoenix, who, coming off of Stand By Me, this is probably his second best performance bar that film. It follows his character and how he doesn't want that life anymore of constantly being on the run and being a fugitive. And his father's like, no, we've got to stick together. We're a family. We don't just leave because we feel like it. We're all in this together. And it's about his relationship with his father, of how he's just not happy and wants to be free of it and live his own life. The ending to it, to me, just ends on this beautiful note. As sad as it is, but it's such a good film. If you've not seen it, do yourself a favour. Just whack it on. You won't be disappointed by it. It's just a fantastic, fantastic story. So coming up next for me, at the number 7 spot, is my favourite Terry Gilliam film, and that is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Really, really underrated fantasy film, this. Sort of takes place in this fictitious European city, which is on the brink of war, and we get thrown into this theatre there, which is sort of telling the story of Baron Munchausen. When the the original Baron Munchausen, the real one, turns up, and he decides, right, I'm going to tell the story of how it went. And he's this sort of like adventurer. He has these sort of like 4 followers as well. Each one of them has like different superpowers. And then the film just sort of takes this turn where it follows him from a much older perspective, where he tries to reunite all his followers again and ends up going on this adventure. So as I said, they all have like different superpowers. One of them can run really fast. One of them's got really powerful hearing and powerful lungs, so you can create like gusts of winds. One of them's got really, really good eyesight and has impeccable aim. And the other one has tremendous strength. Great cast to this as well. Particularly from the supporting cast, you've got Oliver Reed, Uma Thurman, Jonathan Pryce, who's hilarious in this as well. Robin Williams as well. Really, really sort of like unsung performance from him. Eric Idle as well. Just a fantastic fun film. It's one of those films that was always on Channel 5, similar to The Goonies. It's another one of those films for me that was on as a kid. I saw and loved, but didn't catch the name of it. And being that was a time period when it predated the internet, it was just like one of those come and go things. But yeah, definitely check this one out if you've not seen it, if you like sort of like fantasy films. Next for me at the number 6 spot is Midnight Run. Just a great sort of road trip. Not buddy cop movie, but the situation doesn't really grant that. But it's sort of about this hitman who's been hired to bring back this accountant who embezzled money from the mob. And the movie just... What makes the movie is the journey they go on. The chemistry they have together is just absolutely great. One of Robert De Niro's probably underrated films, but one of his best ones as well. Outside of pretty much all the stuff he did with Scorsese. But it is absolutely fantastic. Just a fun film. Great scenery in it as well. Great scenes, great acting. Check it out if you've not seen it. Just a hugely entertaining film. So coming up next for me at the number 5 spot is probably one of Oliver Stone's most underrated films, and that is Talk Radio. Very small, very subtle film. The whole film basically takes place in a radio station, bar some flashback scenes. You got an absolute stellar cast to this as well. Alec Baldwin's in there, John C. McGinley, probably most famous playing Dr. Cox in Scrubs. And you've got Michael Wincott as well, who just plays this sort of like crazy stoner teenager who he's great in everything he's in. Films like The Crow and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves and Three Musketeers. But for me, the standout performance is clearly from Eric Bogosian. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He absolutely gives one of my favourite performances in film ever. It's an 11 out of 10 for acting class in this film. The premise to it is very simple. It pretty much just follows this radio presenter who's very controversial in what he says. Some people either love him or hate him, and he just doesn't really care about that. All he wants to do is have a conversation with some subject matter and some context and some interest to it. It just leads to an absolutely fantastic monologue towards the end of the film. It just keeps you hooked and riveted and absolutely fascinated with what he's saying. Check it out if you've not seen it. It just blew my mind when I saw it. Just such an underrated film. Coming up next for me, at the number 4 spot, is probably another film that was at the other end of the spectrum compared to Talk Radio. It's one of my favourite comedies ever made. That is the first Naked Gun film, starring Leslie Nielsen, the late great Leslie Nielsen. Oh my word! The first Naked Gun film is just absolutely fantastic in its pacing. The jokes just come at you a million miles an hour, and they just never ever stop. Pretty much follows Frank Drebin, and he's investigating the attempted murder of one of his colleagues, played by O.J. Simpson. And it leads him to the villain, who's pretty much come up with his plan to assassinate the Queen of England when she goes there on her tour. And he does it through this sort of like his electrical watch, where he just presses a button and it activates something in an assailant of his choice to try to carry out the assassination. But for me, what works for this film is the most is Leslie Nielsen himself. He's not quite a dim-witted cop, but he's not the brightest either. Just a lot of the things that happen that lead to the humour, just things going over his head. One of my favourite scenes is the scene where he's actually in the antagonist's apartment office, and the whole place just falls to shit, and he's trying stop everything from being destroyed. He's got all these priceless vases, priceless paintings. He ends up sort of saving all these vases from falling, puts them all back on the shelf, and then to pull himself up, he pulls the shelf down, just destroying everything. It's just absolutely fantastic. Just this absolutely funny as fuck movie. Check it out if you've not seen it. The sequels are just as funny, but in terms of a film, they're not as good. They're still definitely worth checking out though. But the first one is the masterpiece in the series. Yeah, just if you're feeling down or having a bad day, watch Naked Gun. It will just immensely cheer you up. So coming up next for me at the number 3 spot is a Robert Zemeckis film that he made between the first and second Back to the Future films. And that is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This film just needs to be commended for taking a huge leap in the technical stuff behind films. I think it's the first feature film where we saw the hybrid of live action and animation, and it still to this day looks fantastic. Not flawless, but still fantastic. So we follow Bob Hoskins' character, who plays Eddie Valiant, who's investigating the death of Maroney, who was pretty much the head of Toontown, as it were. He's a very stern and very hard-faced cop, which we find out about his backstory with him and his brother. Not the biggest lover of cartoons, but cartoon characters are very much grounded in this universe and are very real. Leads to absolute, just some great stuff captured on film. Christopher Lloyd is the villain. When the big reveal happens at the end, it terrified me as a child. It's the stuff of nightmares. As an adult, no, it's not scary, but I could see children being scared by it. It's just absolutely terrifying. Very sort of film noir, this as well, paying homage to those old movies from the 30s and 40s. You've got the femme fatale as well, Jessica Rabbit, who everybody sort of finds attractive. One of the great lines as well is when Valiant asks Jessica Rabbit, what you see in Roger? Like, why'd you marry him? And she's like, he makes me laugh. yeah, just really, really clever quips like that. If you've not seen it, check it out. It's not for everyone. It's not everyone's cup of tea. I know a lot of people who don't really like animated and live action blended together. But for me, that's something that never really bothered me. It just leads to such a fantastic, fantastic film. Never really sort of was repeated this. The only thing I could really think of close to it was Space Jam, which still looks good, but Space Jam has nowhere near the quality this film has in terms of script and story. But completely, again, worth checking out if you've not seen it. So that leads me to my top two films, which for me was just an absolute headache of a decision to try and make. I made the decision based on the fact that I absolutely love and adore both of these films. But my number two choice, the love for me wasn't there instantly as it was for my number one choice. My number two choice is a film that grew on me over time. The more and more I watched it, whereas my number one choice, my love for that film was absolutely instant. Before even finishing the film, I knew it was one I was going to love pretty much forever. But as I said, my number two choice is a film I didn't love instantly. The love I have for that film came later on through repeated viewings. So my number two choice is Tim Burton's Beetlejuice. As I said, love didn't come instantly for this. I didn't know what to make of it the first time I saw it. Beetlejuice obviously is the title character of this film. Not in the film very much. I think it's something like 15 minutes all added together at a total of. But a really, really good, fun, supernatural comedy film from Tim Burton. The main premise of the film sort of follows this couple who are in the middle of finishing building their house and are decorating it. And they end up tragically dying, and their ghosts come back to the house, and the house obviously goes up for sale. New family moves in. They want to get rid of the new family. The ghosts sort of then enter the spirit world, which is just this absolutely insanely designed world, which we absolutely love. They end up seeing a TV advert for Beetlejuice, who pretty much advertises that you can get rid of the living from your house if you want them to. But they're strongly advised not to use him. He doesn't work well with others. He's a bit off the chain. But obviously the film, they do summon him. You have to say his name 3 times. They do meet him. He's just this sort of off-the-chain businessman / salesman / lawyer type talking character. Very, very quick. Is very, very out for himself completely. Possibly the most animated and the most colourful Michael Keaton's ever been. You got great performances in it as well. As mentioned, Michael Keaton, Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, Catherine O'Hara, Winona Ryder, Jeffrey Jones. One of my favourite characters as well is Otho, who's pretty much this living sort of paranormal expert who's a bit very superstitious. He has one of my favourite lines in the movies, which is, "Don't mind her, somebody just dropped a house on her sister." It's just like the bitchiest thing to say. Yeah, just so creative. The soundtrack to it, Danny Elfman's music is just on point. Him and Tim Burton's visuals and Danny Elfman's music just go hand in hand together. Just absolutely fantastic. The lines from Michael Keaton are just absolutely hilarious. With a hilarious ending as well. I love the scene in the waiting room with the tickets and the witch doctor who shrinks his head. It's absolutely fantastic. Not for everyone. Could be a bit zany for some people. But as I said, not a film I loved the first time. Didn't know what to make of it. Didn't know whether I loved it. Didn't know whether I disliked it. But the more and more I watched it, it definitely grew on me, and I'm absolutely in love with it. It's my number 2. Never really get bored of watching this film. Just absolutely fantastic. So that leads me into my number 1 film from '88. Probably the best action movie ever made, in my opinion. A very subtle and small type of action movie that takes place in one location. And that is John McTiernan's Die Hard. What can be said about this film as to how good it is? The premise is a simple one, yet very, very effective. Pretty much this building and its residents are taken hostage by this sort of German terrorist group. And we follow John McClane's character, who's a police officer from New York, flying over to Los Angeles to see his wife, try and reconcile their broken relationship. And the building they're in gets taken hostage by this German terrorist group led by Hans Gruber, played magically by Alan Rickman, who just commands the screen when he's on it. Bruce Willis and Alan Rickman are just the great yin-yang of this, the villain and the hero. Just absolutely superb performances from both of them. But getting back to the premise, it follows a group of terrorists in a building that each sort of get taken out one by one by this off-duty police officer who's having the worst day ever. And the worst time ever. It's just absolutely fantastic action film. I regard this as a Christmas film as well. I don't really care what anyone says. It's one I watch every year at Christmas, but I try to watch it on Christmas Eve if I can. Yeah, just a fantastic action film. If you've not seen it, do yourself a favour, go and watch it right away. You will not be bored by it at all. The music in it is absolutely fantastic and haunting and chilling, particularly the stuff with the bells. The death sequences are absolutely entertaining and enjoyable as hell to watch. Just great action. John McTiernan coming fresh off of Predator to direct this. Some of that really carries over into this film. The characters in it are fantastic. You've got obviously John McClane, his wife, Ellis, who's this sort of sleazeball businessman who you really love to see sort of get his comeuppance after he sort of betrays John McClane. Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber, the villain, is great. Reginald Val Johnson as Al, the police officer who's trying to help him from the outside. Just absolutely great. Dwayne Johnson, the sergeant in charge, is absolutely hysterical. The two FBI agents, Johnson and Johnson, who just so no relation. One of them's black and one of them's white. It's just really good stuff. The news reporter as well, played by Walter Beck from Ghostbusters. Another sort of sleazebag, pretty much in the film as well. Hugely, just as I said, the fun is off the charts with this film. It's so good, so fantastic. Great ending as well. Great characters, great direction. Just a great all-round film. Absolutely fantastic. Two decent sequels as well, in my opinion. hugely enjoyable and entertaining. As I said before, if you've not seen it, check it out. You won't be disappointed by it. Just absolutely fantastic. So yeah, that's my top 20 favourite films from 1988. I hope I've given you some good recommendations to check out if you're interested. And I'm just going to ask if you kindly subscribe to the channel. I know this is in its infancy and I'm trying to churn out a lot of videos quickly. But yes, thanks very much for watching and take care. I'll hopefully be back soon with my top films from 1989. So yeah, thanks very much and take care.